Well, it's been a perfect week in Lake Okee-dokee, Florida, my hometown. Down on the edge of the Everglades. The weather was sunny and in the 70s every day. Perfect for finding Bigfoot. Saturday started like always, with folks congregating at Okee-dokee Donuts, the morning Kickstarter for Lake Okee-dokee's merchant class. The little shop is owned by Amy Bledsoe, a three-generation native, who, much to the initial disappointment of her parents, opted not to go to college. Instead, she took the tuition money they had saved, rented a storefront, and opened Lake Okee-dokee's first and only donut shop. It quickly became the favorite haunt of those with stores and businesses in town as a first stop before starting their day. Over time, these morning gatherings sort of became an impromptu Chamber of Commerce meeting in which Lake Okee-dokee business owners discussed, over a donut and coffee, ways to promote local business. And it became an income gold mine, with the added benefit of closing at 4 p.m. each day. It gave Amy her evenings free. On Saturday, the talk turned to a highly rated cable TV show in which a team of so-called experts traveled to various wilderness locations in the U.S. in search of evidence for Bigfoot, a legendary ape-like creature that has sparked many sightings over the years and which is even part of Native American lore. Most Lake Okee-dokee residents had heard of the Everglades version of Bigfoot, the so-called skunk ape, which derived its name from its telltale smell. Conversation quickly moved to whether Bigfoot really existed, with some supporting the belief that it did, and an equally passionate group arguing the opposite. Non-believers cited numerous reasons for their view. The eastern spotted skunk, which is listed as an Everglades species, was, they contended, the real source of the odor. They raised the usual standard rationales, such as the fact that none of them had personally seen one, and wouldn't believe it until they did. The improbability of a large primate living in proximity to humans without being seen on a regular basis, and their certainty that all of the pictures that could be found on the internet were simply hoaxes perpetrated by guys wearing Bigfoot suits. But believers had equally strong arguments. First, that skunks are rarely seen or smelled in the area, and that the more recent introduction of the Burmese python into the Everglades made it questionable as to whether there were any skunks left at all. Second, that the notion that sightings were a hoax raised the question of why someone would spend hundreds of dollars on a realistic Bigfoot costume and roam around the local swamps braving gators and cottonmouths on the off chance that someone would spot them and be fooled. Moreover, they argued, the number of Bigfoot sightings nationwide meant that Bigfoot was either real or impersonating one was a booming pastime in the country, ranking right behind Civil War enactment, and which was driving an equally robust Bigfoot costume manufacturing industry. For the record, the crowd was also sprinkled with a smattering of Bigfoot agnostics, who couldn't quite decide which side to take. But almost everyone agreed that whether Bigfoot was real or not, attracting the TV show to Lake Okee-dokee could be fun and provide a much-needed infusion of capital from which all could benefit. As the excitement about attracting the show escalated with its presumed benefits to the local economy, a plan began to form. It was reasoned that if anyone had seen or smelled a skunk ape, it would be Swamp Man Odom, the local Everglades hermit. And since Tammy Kay and Bob Jackson Jr. had built a very successful business taking tourists out by airboat to see Swamp Man in his native habitat, so to speak, Bob Jr. was quickly deputized to visit him and see what he might tell them. Others discussed contacts they had made over the years that might be used to network to the show's producers so they could be invited to Lake Okee-dokee for a look-see. Bob Jr. raced home to tell Tammy Kay about a plan and deputized her to actually go out and talk to Swamp Man. Unbeknownst to others in town, Tammy Kay had been slipping Swamp Man $50 a week or so ever since the tours had hit big. It was her way of saying thank you, and hopefully inducing Swamp Man to tolerate the daily incursions of the loud tour airboats into his space. For his part, Swamp Man appreciated the money, as it allowed him to eat better and to make certain improvements in his lifestyle. For one thing, he was able to abandon his old dugout canoe for a used aluminum one. And instead of having to pole or paddle it, he acquired a second-hand electric trolling motor, which ran off a car battery that he charged with the solar cell at Bob Jr. and Earl Suggan's fishing camp. So now, Swamp Man had the means to shop in Lake Okee-dokee weekly instead of monthly. He could make the trip in half the time and do so without exhausting himself. Quick to act, Tammy Kay immediately airboated out to visit Swamp Man. Conversation with the hermit was never easy, and he was at first reluctant to talk about or even acknowledge that he knew of the skunk ape. But with some gentle prodding, Swamp Man finally mumbled, "I leave him alone, and he leaves me alone." Tammy Kay was ecstatic. She quickly excused herself and headed back to tell Bob Jr. the great news. The skunk ape was real. On Monday morning, the atmosphere at Okee-dokee Donuts was electric. As Bob Jr. reported what Swamp Man had said, the crowd, including a local reporter, reached new heights of excitement. The oracle had spoken. The skunk ape was real. Believers gloated. Doubters were chastened. Agnostics considered conversion. Then, Harlan Covington, a seventh-generation Lake Okee-dokee attorney, reported that he had networked through some college classmates to the producers of the show, and they were sending someone to Lake Okee-dokee on Thursday to scout the town as a future location. It couldn't get better than that. Thursday found the little donut shop jammed with townsfolk as an assistant producer from the show stood near the cash register to address them. Everyone knew the drill. He would ask for a show of hands of anyone who thought that they had seen, or in this case smelled, a skunk ape. Attendees stole sideways glances, eager to glimpse who among them had actually had this unique experience and so might be featured on the show. But no hands were raised. Was it possible that not one person had really seen a skunk ape? Then, to everyone's surprise, the assistant producer pointed to a raised hand way in the back. "Yes, sir. Will you tell us about your experience?" The crowd parted, and there stood Swamp Man. He scanned the room before speaking, and then quietly said, "I leave him alone, and he leaves me alone. You should do the same." And with that, he turned and left, trailing Bob Jr., the reporter, and others behind him like an archipelago. Ignoring their entreaties, he walked with humble purpose to the town dock, got in his canoe, and disappeared into the swamp. And that's the news from Lake Okee-dokee, the little town on the edge of the Everglades that time pretty much ignores, where all the women are right, all the men are happy, and all the children play outdoors.